Hi, I'm Allison Hare, a former corporate executive on a quest to help you and me create a little more space and freedom in our busy lives. Welcome to the Late Learner Podcast, where here we are breaking down old, tired norms. You know, the ones that we are all taught to live in. But we discover more modern approaches here that just plain work better for you. So what are we late learning today? Well, podcasting is hot. I know. You think everyone and their mother has a podcast by now, right? And you might be thinking like, should I have a podcast? Could I do this? You know, what is that idea in the back of your mind? What if you could have your own show, your own little corner of the internet where you could have juicy conversations about what is interesting and meaningful to you? What if your show was the place where people went to laugh and just put down their armor and just have fun? What if you could literally have people change their lives by the ideas and stories that you share? What if your show was the companion to that stressed out, busy mom on her way back from school drop-off? Maybe it helped her feel not so alone and more empowered. So empowered that she started applying those principles that she learned on your show and started sharing it in her circles. What if you could use that show to build a real community? What if that community grew to build an impact that your show could change a culture? What if your little idea for your podcast could change the entire trajectory of your life? What is possible? Super exciting. And I'll tell you, podcasting is a growing medium. And I promise you the innovation, the possibilities are only beginning. It is still young and in its infancy. And I'm going to share with you why. But I'm also going to tell you why a podcast would not be a good idea. So if you're in that position where maybe you thought, I've had this podcast, I've been kicking around this idea for a few years. I started, I got stuck, I got overwhelmed with technology, life got in the way. Do I continue on this path and really see it through? Or is this just not a good fit? And it is going to be crystal clear by the end of this show in which camp you serve. But it is a reflection inward and kind of help you understand a little bit more about the podcasting landscape. But before I jump in, let's get to the good stuff. What is stuff? It's the surprisingly true, useful fun fact. A new study out of the UK commissioned by Cotswold Outdoor found that 7 out of 10 people have a happy place. Here's what I think is shocking. Who are the 3 out of 10 that don't have a happy place? Can we find them and love on them? Anyway, the data shows that many Gen Zers' happy place is watching a sunset. Older generations like me, I'm part of the Gen X generation, are more content walking along the coast, strolling through the countryside, or sitting in a garden. Millennials are the most happy cuddling up with kids or relaxing in their own garden. A staggering 93% said their happy place was outdoors in nature. I agree with that. And I'd love it if you could give yourself a moment to notice and think about where's your happy place. And if you want to spend more time there, let me give you some more ideas to put yourself there. I want you to download my free PDF worksheet of 40 ways to add more energy to your day, which essentially is finding those little slices of your own joy that you may have forgotten, but once you prioritize it, all of a sudden your energy surges. And that is free to you. Just go to AllisonHare.com/energy. All right, let's get back to why you should not podcast. Let's get back to why podcasting may be a dumb idea for you right now. Let's talk about the podcast industry. The data is showing record highs of people listening. This is super interesting. And when you think about it, it makes sense. It is a portable medium. You can listen and multitask. You can drive and listen. You can do your laundry. You can go on walks and runs and listen at the same time. You can do chores around your house and listen. There's so many things you can do. It's a little different from TV or video, which requires a little more singular attention. Podcasting also has a low barrier of entry, meaning it's actually really easy to record and publish a show, very low or no cost. Now, because of the high records of people listening, let me talk about the stats according to Edison Research and Infinite Dial. There are over 5 million podcasts out there, of which, now, let's just put this into perspective. There are 5 million podcasts out there, but YouTube has somewhere in like, I don't know, it's like the 100 millions of YouTube channels, okay? So let's just put this into perspective. But let's get this a little more condensed for you. There are over 5 million podcasts out there, of which only 460,000 are active. Active means that they have published new episodes in the past 90 days. So what is that massive gap between the podcasts that exist and those that are active? Well, this is the reason number one of why not to do a podcast. Number one, inconsistency. If you cannot commit to a schedule, I want you to listen really careful for all of these reasons, but this one especially, because I'm going to give you both sides of the coin. If you cannot commit to a schedule where you can be consistent, it probably does not make sense to do it. If you determine a publishing schedule, whether it's daily, weekly, every other week, or monthly, it's important to stick to it and find a schedule that works for you. I will have you note that you can record in batches, meaning you can record kind of in bulk or even in seasons, meaning it's good to launch a podcast with, let's say, 5 to 10 episodes in the can, meaning they are recorded, they're ready to go, so you aren't scrambling for content each week. So it's good to kind of do this before you launch, right? Like, so you have a little bit of a bank build out. When you are kind of scrambling for content, that's what causes stress, disappointment, and honestly, a shoddy show. And you also may feel a little guilty, right? Like, let me just dip out. I haven't been very consistent, whatever. You don't want that. And I will side note one other thing here. Even though the podcast might be a side hobby or not your primary source of income or attention, you must treat it like a profession to make it work. That means you dedicate carved out, protected time to work on it. So I'll give you an example. When I started this podcast, Late Learner, well, it was called something else entirely back then. It was 5 years ago, right? In fact, it has had 4 different names, but that's a story for another time, okay? But it is good to know that podcasts always iterate. They always evolve. I don't feel any shame that my podcast has had a bunch of names. It has evolved. It was early 2019. I got a promotional email about a podcast workshop, like launch your own podcast. At that time, I had been going through a lot of turmoil personally. At the time, it was a time of political unrest. I was really upset over that and felt like, God, I wish I could help. I wish it could be different. I was volunteering heavily at an inner city school where I was exposed to a lot of systemic oppression that I did not understand the depths of it until I was immersed in it. And I'd also experienced some major disappointment in the maternal health care system in the US and healthcare in general. I had a lot of personal issues where I was kind of going through this. And I got the sense that if people knew what I was learning in real time, we could band together and change things. I wanted to figure out how could I make an impact on a larger scale. And it was very clear that voting once every 2 years was not enough. This was never a political podcast. That was never the intention. It was just kind of the catalyst. And I felt so helpless as to how I could make an impact. So when I got this email, I didn't even look at the price or details. I just said yes. I had no idea what my show was going to be about. I just knew that I wanted to make a difference and just trusted, hey, if I've got somebody helping me along the way and some kind of structure, I'm going to figure it out. And that's what I did. And back then, I want to be clear, what is the number one thing of why you shouldn't do it is consistency, right? And so back then, I had a very full-time job in the high-tech sales. I was working 60-plus hour work weeks where I actually had to go in the office every day. This was before the pandemic, before all of the hybrid working. So I had a solid commute. I had 2 kids in 2 different schools, plus after-school activities, plus a husband, making sure the house didn't burn down, yada, yada, yada. So if you're wondering, like, where would I even fit it in? I hear you. I get it. And what I had to do is I had to create a system around my chaotic lifestyle. And what I would do is on Tuesday nights while my son had karate, I would write out my interview questions. That was my protected time that I would kind of double task and, make sure my eyes were on him, but also getting the stuff done. I would record my interviews and episodes typically after the kids went to sleep after hours. I don't do that now. At that time it worked. And so I would do like 8 o'clock, 8:30, 9 p.m. It's a little bit different now again. Or I would do them on the weekends or use my lunch hour to record. And in my office, it had a soundproofed private phone booth. So I would use that and I would record podcast episodes. I would use Saturday mornings to edit and schedule the podcast, and I would do them in bulk. So like I said before, I would have a whole bunch of podcasts and interviews. So I would just have them there. So I was never scrambling for content. And I had several weeks already loaded and scheduled out. So that way it was a little less pressure on me. And honestly, back then, I didn't know what kind of impact my podcast would have. In fact, I didn't know if anybody would care about what I shared. I needed an outlet. And I think it's important to consider, what is the podcast for? And sometimes you just need an outlet to express yourself. And that's okay. It can grow into something later. And I committed to showing up whether I felt like it or not. It's the same kind of concept as your job. So when you're thinking about it, can you be consistent if you have a way to kind of fit it into your schedule and have some protected pockets of time? Reason number 2 to not start a podcast. Rogan or bust. Joe Rogan or bust. Listen, Joe Rogan is by far the number 1 podcaster in the world. He was the very first podcaster to ink a reportedly $100 million deal exclusively with Spotify. But keep in mind, Joe Rogan has been doing this podcast thing since, I don't know, like 15, 16 years, 17, maybe almost 20 years now, when podcasts were in its infancy. You love him or hate him, he has put in the work in just that time. Same thing with Mark Maron, Tim Ferriss, all of these kind of renegade people that have had podcasts forever. These are people that have really, really built up their time and energy. Lewis Howes too, all of those people. So remember when I told you about that podcast graveyard of over 5 million podcasts, but only 460,000 are active? Let me tell you why that is. Well, there are a few reasons. One is that your main purpose is to monetize it. And you absolutely can monetize your podcast. But if your main goal is to make a lot of money and this be your one thing, let's break it down. Let's talk through what that looks like. There are 3 ways to monetize a podcast. One is from downloads alone. And what that means is that there are advertisers that will pay what's called CPM, cost per 1,000 downloads. Something typical can be anywhere from $16 to $25 per 1,000 downloads. Downloads are different than listens or listen throughs. That is for another show. I'm not going to get into the weeds of that. But CPM, right? $16 to $25 cost per 1,000. Now, tracking the number of people downloading your episode can be tricky, and growing your audience can be unpredictable. This may sound a little counterintuitive, but I want you to hear me out here. I don't want you to measure something that doesn't matter, especially for the first year. What you truly, genuinely want is engaged listeners. And the way you get truly engaged listeners is over time, making incredible content, making great content that is specifically for them. I can address that in other places, but let's keep going on. What you really want is engaged listeners. You may not always hear from them. And in fact, most of your listeners will be silent fans. I mean, think about your own habits. Do you reach out to your favorite podcasters and tell them every single week what you loved about their show? Do you write a review? I know I don't most of the time. I love podcasts. I consume them like I'm popping candy. I'm not, messaging Dak Shepard and telling him how much I love him. I probably should, but I'm sharing it with my friends. I'm sharing Mel Robbins' podcast about whatever topic it is. I want you to consider that there may be a lot of silent fans, but you want engagement, right? And so I would love to take this opportunity to invite you to review this podcast for me while we're talking about it. It does help other people find me, and it helps me make a better show for you. So if you get the slightest bit of value from this show, will you go on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, Castbox, whatever it is, and rate it and leave me a written review? I will be forever grateful. You will get wings and speed past to heaven. I'm sure of it. You'll get good karma, all of that stuff. You will have blessings aplenty. Okay, back to the monetization. This is very broadly speaking, and I'm going to go through some numbers, okay? So bear with me, and then we're going to go through the other two ways of making money here. Traditional advertisers typically will be interested in your show if you have 10,000 or more downloads per episode. On average, a podcaster will make $500 to $900 a month, okay? So if you're thinking of full-time income at 10K downloads, it's not a ton. Like it's not a ton on its own. So 10,000 downloads or more. You can make a real living off of 100,000 downloads per episode or more, typically speaking. The average podcast, and again, this is median. And that doesn't mean that you're going to be lower, above, or that it's bad or good either way. I'm going to tell you why. The average podcast has 421 downloads per episode. Now, can you make money with 421 downloads per episode? Hell yes, you can. The first way to make money is through traditional advertisers. The second one, and again, the barrier of entry is higher than the other ways. It is much higher in many cases. The second way is through sponsorship or brand deals. Again, the goal is to have an engaged audience. And when you're specific about what you offer and who your listener population is, you can partner with related and complementary sponsors to be the featured brand on your show. And the pricing varies to that. It can be extremely lucrative, but it does require you selling and marketing your show as well, typically speaking. Unless your podcast catches fire, which sometimes can happen, but generally speaking, it doesn't. Okay? It doesn't. I'm not trying to be negative Nelly. It just doesn't always do that. But there are some things that you can put into place to make sure that your strategy is tight so that if it is going to catch fire, you are prepared and you've done everything to kind of position it that way. Most people do not position their podcast to catch fire. The third way to make money is through your own brand or company. In other words, the podcast can act almost as a marketing arm, essentially a spoke on the wheel that drives leads to your main business. Now, my podcast, Late Learner, takes this approach. I've had traditional advertisers and sponsors before, but it didn't make financial sense to keep it going for the reasons I shared before. So I took them out and had no advertisers, and I leveraged this platform to invite my listeners for me to be the main sponsor. Me and my business, we are the main sponsor and the main partner for this podcast, promoting this podcast. And what I do is I leverage this platform to invite my listeners to book a free discovery call with me. What I do is I offer executive consulting that ranges from podcast coaching, sales training, personal brand strategy, marketing, and one of my favorite things, transition coaching. Meaning, if you're going through a massive change and would like guidance and clarity through the process to get on the other side victorious, get some goals ready and have everything in place to achieve them, I'm your girl for that. This is like what I do in my sleep. I especially love working with those high-performing women who are time and energy starved. I've designed everything I do to cater to that woman to get her results fast and without blowing up her life. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, or you know somebody who could really benefit from having a partner, schedule a free call with me and let's see if I can help. If we are not a good fit to work together, I'll do my best to connect you with the right people and resources that can. So if that's ringing your bell, schedule a time right now at AllisonHair.com/schedule. See, that's how you can embed it in your show. Schedule a free call. Maybe you have items or services ready for purchase. Maybe you have a free PDF download. Take a free quiz, or several ways to drive leads to your business. Now, why does this not work? Because very often your expectations of speed to market or sales conversion or audience growth may not be right sized from the start. I call this the starry-eyed podcaster. If you build it, they will come. And I've often heard people say about their podcast, I really want to share my story and help other people not feel so alone, which is so noble. But it is anemic without a smart strategy, a strong execution plan, and a compelling way for people to engage and interact with you as a brand. And honestly, like, you are a brand. When you have your name, your podcast, anything out there, the personal brand is truly the digitization of your reputation, of which a podcast is part of that. But without that strong execution plan, that smart strategy, a compelling way for people to engage and interact with you, it can be a very disappointing journey that fizzles out too soon. If there's no strategy, it most likely will not yield the results that you want. Okay? So reason number 3 to not start a podcast. See how it goes theory. Let me just put it out there and see what happens. This is almost as effective as trying to manifest your multi-million-dollar lifestyle and world trips to Bali by putting it on the vision board year after year after year and waiting for the universe to deliver your journaling every day. But if you're going to be putting in the effort to create a good podcast, you must put effort into the strategy. Honestly, most podcasters skip over this entirely. They may not know what a good strategy looks like. It's easy to put content out there. It's harder to put a strategy around it. And so maybe you're listening to this and you're thinking, you know, my best friend and I are so funny, and we just like, if everybody could hear us, they would just love it. You might scribble a few topics together, get an episode or 2 recorded, and realize, oh, wait, I need to market and promote this? Like, just posting that I have a new episode on Facebook isn't enough? I thought people would just find me on the algorithm. No, it's not enough. It's not enough. And I get it. I can't even tell you how many times in the past 5 years I would complain to friends that, oh, I wish someone would just pluck me out of obscurity and give me a multi-million-dollar deal because I know I've got the goods. And honestly, most podcasters never make it past publishing episode 3, let alone podcast number 8. Let's get you to episodes 50 and beyond and do it intentionally with the right strategy. So I'm going to put a positive spin on this because Sally Cynic really isn't my jam, but helping people have powerful, impactful podcasts that move the needle, those are what move people. That really is my jam. Maybe call me Poly Podcast Power? I don't know. But let me walk you through how I do this and why I'm even doing this episode focused on podcasts. Late learner is not a business, and what I do is typically I don't advertise the services that I offer from a podcast perspective. My degree is in broadcasting. When I was in college, all I ever wanted to do was to be on the radio. But having a mother who was a stay-at-home mom of 6 kids beat it into my head. Allison, never rely on a man to make money. Always make your own. And because of this kind of programming, it was in my head that there was no money in radio. I spent my entire career choosing safe routes that would guarantee money. I put my creative self and truly the essence of who I am on a shelf in the service of earning money. I did this over and over and over again for decades. Hold that thought. When I was in the corporate world, after I'd started my podcast in 2019, I completely became obsessed with podcasting. I loved every inch of it. The interviews, the questions, the relationships I built with people I would have never met otherwise. Like I've had some of the most influential people in the world as guests on this podcast. Seth Godin, Jesse Itzler, Academy Award nominated actress Mariel Hemingway of the legendary Ernest Hemingway family, and countless others. I even enjoyed producing the podcast and figured out how to make the technical side super easy and less intimidating. Lots of people began asking me about how to launch their podcast back then. So I started a side business helping others launch their shows. And some of the biggest and most beloved podcasts in the world, like the top comedy podcast, The Commercial Break, and many others started from my little program back then. And today, my podcast has won awards and ranks in the top 1.5% globally, over 500,000 downloads, probably way higher than that now. And honestly, in the height of my corporate burnout, I stopped doing it. I had no more energy to keep all the plates spinning. As you know, I started it really with a very packed schedule, but it keeps coming up now again and again and again. So I've revamped the program and am taking it out of retirement. I've revamped the whole thing. I'm now offering it again. But this time, I am running a cohort where it is a full, hands-on, 8-week podcast program that includes everything from the inception of your podcast idea to a full launch with strategy. Like you and I are working on it together. This is like a do it with me approach where you are not alone. You are set up for success from the start. If you want to do this right, you want to have a partner riding alongside with you, book a free call with me right now at AllisonHair.com/schedule and make sure you indicate that you are interested in the podcast launch. Because I offer so much hands-on support, I only have limited spots and I may not do it again. Again, this is a service that I do not advertise, but it's one that I have a ton of success in. So do not wait. And if you know somebody who's been kicking around an idea for a podcast or got, started somewhere and got stuck along the way, send them this episode and the link. I'm going to link everything in the show notes as well. Okay, so just to recap, these are the 3 reasons not to start a podcast. Lack of consistency is number 1. Rogan or bust is number 2, essentially doing it just for the money. And number 3 is see how it goes theory, which banks almost solely on hope and no strategy or structure to put behind it. I'm probably going to do another episode on, let's say, 5 reasons to do a podcast or how to make it amazing and compelling and to grow it. But let me know what you'd like to know. You can shoot me a DM on the socials or email me directly at allison@allisonhair.com. Let me know what you need. And here are my parting thoughts on you and your podcast, and if you're still on the fence. If you have an idea, a mission, a frustration, or something that keeps itching at your insides, it could very well be more of a divine knocking than just an irritation. Maybe it's an outlet to express yourself. My best advice is to follow it through and ask yourself the questions of what impact would you like to make? What would you like the listener to walk away with? And what gift do you give yourself for sharing your perspective and findings being fully expressed. And if you want help fleshing it out and seeing if your podcast has real legs, book that free call with me. I'll even give you a free equipment guide to make the tech part super easy for you too, as a thank you for taking the time for yourself. Again, AllisonHare.com/schedule. I hope you will act on that universal nudge you may be receiving and see where it takes you. It doesn't do you any good to keep yourself as the best kept secret when you have a mission to serve others and to serve yourselves in the highest version of yourself. So let's help you find a sustainable way to make it real. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.